Hi and welcome! Today I want to share a strategy for the Gold Quarry map that helps me play more effectively. Let's start on the left side of the map. Our game begins in sector F3, right when we reach this truck. We can switch to sniper mode and control the road where opponents are heading to point C. In rare cases, very fast-wheeled vehicles may already be passing through this area, giving you a chance for an early kill. If you have good reaction speed, focus on the left side of the big truck. If your reaction isn't the best, focus on the right side of the truck. Next, we need to climb this hill, which will be the stage for the first phase of the battle. Here, our goal is to gather information about what's happening on the map. Now let's analyze what we see on our screen. Red zones mark areas to watch for enemies moving toward point C. It's nearly impossible to hit opponents in the red zones, so if you spot someone there, let them get closer to the yellow or green zones. Our main task is to control the first wave of enemies and ensure no one slips through to point C. After confirming that there are no enemies on the right, we focus on catching opponents out of position and controlling sectors F5 and F6. Here's an important tip. Always keep your attention on the right-hand road leading to point C. Once we're sure there are no enemies directly in front of us or to the right, we can start targeting opponents on the left. Before driving to the top of this hill, always double-check for enemies on the right. Now our task is to gather intel on the left side of the screen. The highest priority targets on the left are enemies positioned on this hill. It's one of the most popular spots for opponents since it gives them a clear advantage to eliminate our teammates near point B. Now we need to assess the situation below. It's important to determine whether the enemy is planning to push your position. If not, and you only spot a single enemy tank, you can safely move out and eliminate it. However, the situation changes if you see two or more enemies advancing toward you. Always keep an eye on the right side. Your primary objective is to defend point C, so never lose sight of that goal. When the enemies are pushing us, our goal is to stay calm and avoid rushing. Let the opponents get as close as possible so you can clearly hear their engines and pinpoint each of their positions. The key information you need is whether any of the enemies are trying to flank you from the left or if they're all staying on the right. In either case, make your way downhill. In my situation, I heard that the enemies were attempting to approach from both sides. Don't forget to use smoke grenades to block the enemy's line of sight. No sensible player will drive into smoke without knowing your exact location. Here's the most important tip to remember. If we're being pushed at this position, always move off the hill and fight from below. If we're forced to move downhill to engage in close combat, don't forget to recheck every position after securing the win. Even though this spot is designed for the first phase of the battle, there's nothing stopping us from staying here until the very end and holding point C. Guys, I strongly advise against trying to move to another flank. Being an impenetrable wall that the enemy must overcome to reach point C is far better than abandoning your position to head for point A or B. If you hold point C and let no one through, it reduces the pressure on your teammates, allowing them to focus as a group on capturing the other points. If you avoid making critical mistakes, this position will provide you with plenty of kills and, most importantly, a lot of fun in the game. By the way, if you're driving a slow tank, just do everything the same way. There's no need for any special actions. Now, I'll share some important tips for players in tanks with poor gun depression, and after that, we'll discuss what to do if you start getting tired of staying in one spot. When we're playing Soviet tanks or other tanks with poor reverse speed and gun depression, we never drive to the top of this hill. Our strategy will focus on playing from below. We can gather intel on the enemies to the left, intercept tanks heading to point C, but we can only engage enemies on the left while staying below. If you're tired of staying in this position, we can move on to the second phase of the match and head closer to the enemy spawn point, which will almost completely block the enemy's game on the lower part of the map. We'll move in small bursts, covering several key points. The first key point is just behind the large vehicle. From here, we have a great view of the road that enemies often take toward Point C. Always keep an eye on this road and check to the left, as there may be an ambush waiting for you. The second key point where we need to stop is very close. Again, look to the left and continue moving while keeping an eye on the road leading from the enemy spawn. At the third key point, we check to the left once more, and if there are no enemies, we proceed. Another key point is located on this hill. From here, we get a perfect view and can spot enemies who have just left their spawn. Now we can move to this hill, which provides the best view of the enemy's spawn exit. Tanks with poor gun depression can play from this position, but it will be much harder to fire almost uncontested. Usually I play from the previous hill, but unfortunately from here we lose the great view of the spawn. Guys, before we dive into how to play from the opposite side, I want to say a few words. First of all, I want to thank each and every viewer for watching, subscribing, and leaving comments under the videos. Second, I'd really appreciate it if you could share your thoughts on this video format. Maybe I'm going into too much detail, or perhaps you feel like something is missing. Any feedback is welcome because it helps me improve the content. And third, I kindly ask you to head over to the community tab on my channel after watching this video. I'll be running a poll there where you can decide the future of this series on the channel. I'd really love to know what you think and whether we should continue making these detailed guides for the map, or if I should go back to the old format where I just showed a few positions on the map. Playing from the opposite side is a bit more challenging, but the potential rewards for your efforts are higher. Our goal is to reach the same hill we play from when starting on the other side. At the very beginning of the match, our task is to intercept opponents mindlessly rushing to Point C. Right after that, we need to start controlling the distant road leading to Point C. While playing from this position, we focus most of our attention on the left side of the map. The difficulty of this spot lies in the enemy's ability to take unpredictable positions on the left, so we need to stay as alert as possible. We always start by playing from below, gathering information. Our primary goal is to listen carefully and determine how many enemies are nearby. This position is great because it helps develop your close-quarters combat skills and teaches you to quickly adapt to the battlefield situation. We're playing from a very aggressive spot, and if you hear or see multiple enemies and realize they're starting to push you, it's important to give up a bit of ground and fall back to this position. This is an excellent defensive position. Another key advantage is that it gives you a few precious seconds to analyze the situation on the minimap and assist your team, especially if they're struggling to hold their ground. Once the enemy assault has been stopped and we've outplayed all opponents in close combat, we can consider the battle for the key hill won. Now we can move to the top of the hill, where we'll have a great view of the enemy spawn, allowing us to snipe opponents from the middle of the map. Playing from the top of this hill can rack up a good number of kills, but there's one major drawback. We're very easy to counter from the left. The problem is that the left side of our screen is cluttered with visual noise and it's multicolored. Spotting enemies against this background is extremely difficult, so you'll often get punished by opponents coming from the left for even small mistakes. Before I show you a safer way to play, let me offer a few tips for players using slow tanks or tanks with poor gun depression. When using tanks with poor gun depression, we should never climb to the top of the hill and instead play exclusively from below. It can also be challenging to engage enemies moving along the road on the left. However, if you position your tank like this, you'll have a better chance of taking out the enemy. In any case, tanks with poor gun angles need to win the close quarters fight and then relocate to a position we'll discuss shortly. Now here's an important tip for slow tanks. We can't afford to use the same route that works well for faster tanks, so we need to take a different approach. First, we don't head straight to the key hill. Instead, we make a stop here to assess the situation near point C. If no one on our team intercepted the enemies, we can stay in this position and fight those who've already made it to point C. Once we've ensured the area is clear and safe to move, we proceed to this spot. By now, you'll recognize that we've arrived at the defensive position I mentioned earlier. From here, we can transition to the gameplay strategies we've already discussed. Once you realize that your team is dominating and we've won the battle for the hill, it's time to change positions to minimize unnecessary risks. Instead of staying on top of the hill, we should move as close as possible to the enemy spawn to prevent them from maneuvering across the map. On the hills to the left, there are plenty of positions to play from and rack up kills. I'll show you some of my favorite spots, and you can choose the one that suits your playstyle best. Here's the first spot I love to play from. Enemy tanks approach us from the side and often don't even look in our direction. This position is well protected on the right and is ideal if you're unsure whether there are enemy tanks in sectors E3 and F3. Now here's another more aggressive position that I only take when my team is completely dominating the map. The advantage of this position is that we have a better chance of hearing enemies who might have slipped onto the road to our left. From here, we can focus almost entirely on controlling the center of the map without splitting our attention to the left. By the way, Soviet tanks also perform exceptionally well in these spots, so once you've secured the hill, this is where you should head next. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful. Take care and see you next time.